Don't you want to try the coffee I made just for you? That's what Ethan said, standing over me, with this strange, careful smile. The kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, like he was playing a role. I looked down at the cup. Steam curled up in slow ribbons. But it didn't smell like coffee. Not really. It smelled wrong, bitter, metallic, like something that wasn't meant for anyone to drink. We were at Sabrina's house. Her monthly brunch, always polished, always too perfect. A linen tablecloth, grapefruit halves in glass bowls, jazz playing low from hidden speakers. You could almost forget how much she hated me. Across the table, Sabrina was watching. Her coffee sat untouched. Her spoon tapped idly against the rim, like she had all the time in the world. Ethan's been practicing his pour-over technique, she said lightly, not looking at me. Just for you. The way she said for you made my stomach turn. My name is Isabelle. I'm 29. I work in marketing. I'm good at it. Or I was before all this started. Before I started waking up sick. Before meetings blurred into migraines and clients stopped calling back. Before my own husband started looking at me like I was in the way. But that morning at that table, everything clicked. The last 6 months snapped into place like some sick puzzle. I'd been sick too often, always after meals at their house, always when something big was coming up at work. Sabrina was in the same field. Competing firms, same clients, same circles. And Ethan, he wasn't just my husband anymore. He was her brother first. And recently, it felt like he was her business partner too. I forced a smile. How thoughtful, I said, fingers curling around the warm ceramic. My heart was racing so fast, I thought I might pass out. I didn't drink. Not yet. I just stared into that dark swirl of liquid and thought about the last time I'd ended up in urgent care after one of Sabrina's cleansing teas. The doctors couldn't find anything. No food poisoning, no infection. Just vague symptoms. Dehydration, fatigue, confusion. And Ethan had been right there at my side, holding my hand like he wasn't part of it. I didn't know who to trust anymore. A little laugh escaped me. I played it off like I just remembered something funny. "Hey, Sabrina," I said casually, standing up with the mug in hand. "Would you mind if I used your study real quick? Need to check in on a client thing." She barely looked up. "Try not to break anything." I walked past her chair and made sure to stumble. A real messy stumble, hand to the table, coffee sloshing a little. Enough to make a scene. "Oh, shoot, sorry, I'm such a klutz," I said breathlessly. And in that one motion, I switched our cups. Hers for mine. She smiled through her teeth. No harm done. I carried her coffee, now mine, into the study and set it down on the desk. And then I turned. From the doorway, I could still see the table. Still see them. And I waited. It was the longest minute of my life. Sabrina picked up her cup, the one I'd switched. She sipped. Slowly. Like she wanted me to see it. And I watched. Watched her hands start to tremble. Watched her set the cup down, like it suddenly weighed more than it should. "Ethan," she said, her voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. "Something's wrong." Ethan looked confused at first, then horrified. That wasn't your cup." I stepped back into the room phone, already recording in my hand. "Then whose was it?" I asked. Neither of them said a word. But I saw it in their faces. The guilt, the panic, the realization that I knew. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel sick. I felt sure. It didn't start with poison. It started with things you could brush off. The stomach cramps after dinner at Sabrina's. The dizziness during Monday morning meetings. The weird rash I got on my chest the day I presented to the Henderson group. It all felt explainable, dismissible, a coincidence. That's what Ethan said every time. "Maybe it's stress. Could be the sushi you had for lunch. You're just pushing yourself too hard." And I believed him, at first. I used to laugh at how paranoid people could get, thinking their family was out to get them. But when it's happening to you, it doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like doubt. Just enough uncertainty to make you question your own memory. But there were patterns I couldn't unsee. Like how every time I was sick, Sabrina seemed to swoop in right after. "Don't worry about that client," she'd say at the next event, holding a glass of wine and talking to someone I'd spent weeks chasing. "Isabelle's been under the weather lately. I'd be happy to help in the meantime." She always smiled when she said it, like she was doing me a favor. But I saw the look in her eyes, cold and pleased, and just a little victorious. Then there were the spills. Twice she accidentally dumped wine on my outfit before big meetings. Once it was red just hours before I was supposed to be on a panel at a networking event. She offered me a spare blouse from her guest closet. It was a size too small and practically sheer. I wore it anyway. What choice did I have? And Ethan, I started noticing him defending her more. It's just Sabrina. She's clumsy, not malicious. She offered to help. Isn't that what family does? She looks up to you, babe. Don't be so sensitive. But it wasn't about clumsiness or kindness. It was control. Sabrina had a way of making you feel like everything she did was innocent and everything that went wrong around her was somehow your fault. I began to dread every interaction. The worst was the tea. It was a few weeks before that brunch. I'd dropped by Sabrina's after a morning meeting. She'd insisted I come over to relax before my next pitch. Said she had something calming to help with my migraines. I drank it because I was exhausted and I didn't want to seem ungrateful. An hour later, I was in urgent care with blurred vision, nausea, and a heart rate that wouldn't stabilize. The doctors were baffled. They ran a panel of tests, found nothing definitive, and sent me home. Sabrina said I made it the same way I make mine. Maybe you're just sensitive to herbs. Ethan chimed in. You probably just skipped breakfast. You never eat enough. But I knew what hunger felt like. This wasn't that. This was something deeper, wronger. Like my body was being dismantled piece by piece. After that, I started keeping a log. Dates. What I ate. Who was present. How I felt afterward. At first it felt obsessive, but it also made me feel in control. Like I wasn't just imagining things. The pattern got clearer with every entry. And then there was the Johnson pitch. That account had been mine for 6 months. I'd built the strategy, met with the client, shaped every line of that deck. The day I was supposed to present, I woke up with intense stomach cramps and couldn't even stand without getting dizzy. I called out last minute. Ethan took me to Sabrina's to rest. I slept on her couch for hours while they whispered in the kitchen. 2 days later, I found out Sabrina had pitched the client herself, used my notes, my talking points, and landed the contract. I confronted Ethan that night. You told her everything, didn't you? He shrugged. She asked for input. I didn't know she was going to run with it. She stole my work. She saved the deal. You should be grateful. That was the night I started backing up my files to a separate cloud, forwarding suspicious texts to a private email, keeping a second phone in my bag, cheap prepaid, always recording when I was with them. Because the truth was, I didn't feel safe in my own marriage anymore. Ethan would come home smelling like her perfume. He said it was the office. He said they were planning a surprise anniversary trip, but there were texts I wasn't supposed to see. I can get her out of the way for the Henderson pitch. Think she's catching on. We'll try something stronger this time. I saw them, saved them, sent them to myself. And then I smiled like nothing had changed. Because now I had proof. At brunch, I knew they'd try again. Ethan was too attentive, too careful. His hand shook slightly as he poured my coffee, and he wiped the rim of the mug like he was cleaning up fingerprints. Sabrina's eyes never left me. You're glowing, she said. What's your secret? I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I smiled back. Detoxing, I said. Cutting out toxins. And then I made my move. The stumble, the swap, the walk to the study, and the wait. When she started convulsing, I felt no pity. Only relief. Because finally, someone else was sick. And I was still standing. I stepped into the room as Ethan shouted her name. She was on the floor, pale, shaking. Call an ambulance, she cried, her voice breaking. I didn't hesitate. I dialed, calm, clear, efficient. As I gave the address, I watched Ethan fall apart. What did you do? I asked him quietly. His lips moved. No sound came out. Then finally, it wasn't supposed to be her. She drank the wrong one. Sabrina looked up at him like she'd just been slapped. You said it would just make her miss one meeting, she gasped. You said it wouldn't be traced. She was wrong on both counts. I had every word on video. I should have felt triumphant. Watching Sabrina collapse, watching Ethan's face lose all color, watching the ambulance lights reflect off their perfect little brunch glasses, it should have felt like justice. But it didn't. It felt like grief. Not for them. For me. Because I knew in that moment that everything was truly over. Not just the marriage, not just the trust, the version of my life where I was loved, safe, seen, gone. At the hospital, the halls smelled like antiseptic and something deeper fear maybe. I sat alone in the waiting area while Sabrina was wheeled in unconscious. Ethan had disappeared, mumbling something about parking the car. That was 30 minutes ago. The nurse came out with a clipboard. Family of Sabrina Lang. I stood. I'm her sister-in-law. She raised an eyebrow, clearly reading the tension on my face. She's stabilized. The doctor will speak with you. I nodded numb, following her past beeping monitors and quiet sobs behind curtains. When we stopped outside Sabrina's room, I could see her through the glass. Pale. Tubes in her arm. Her eyes half closed, but open enough to flicker with panic. She wasn't faking. She was poisoned just like I had been. Only this time it was unmistakable. Dr. Harris stepped out. Older woman, crisp voice. We found several toxins in her system. One compound in particular isn't available over the counter. It's usually used in pharmaceutical testing. She studied my face. Is there anything you'd like to tell me about what happened today? I pulled out my phone. Better if I let you hear it for yourself. I played the recording. The brunch. Sabrina gasping. Ethan admitting the mix-up. Her confession that it was supposed to make me sick enough to miss a board meeting. Dr. Harris didn't flinch. This isn't an allergic reaction, she said when it ended. This is deliberate. Just then, Ethan reappeared. Sweaty, pale. Isabelle, please just listen. Dr. Harris stepped between us and pressed the nurse's call button. Security to room 302. Ethan froze. This is all a misunderstanding, he said, holding up his hands. Sabrina was confused. She didn't mean... I cut him off. You mean this wasn't you, I said, scrolling to another text I'd saved. Because I have messages from you and Sabrina, talking about how to make sure I don't show up for the Henderson presentation. I turned to the doctor. I've been hospitalized 3 times in 6 months. Every time it was after food or drink they gave me. Every time the symptoms were just different enough not to be traced. I want tests, I want answers, and I want this documented. Dr. Harris nodded. We'll compare your records. In the meantime, he doesn't go anywhere. 2 security guards arrived, flanking Ethan. He didn't resist. He just stood there, staring at the floor, everything finally sinking in. Sabrina's door creaked open. Her voice was weak, slurred. Ethan! Why? He stepped forward, pleading. We were just trying to protect you. Protect me, I said, stepping closer. From what success, His eyes darted between me and the guards. You were burning out, okay? You weren't sleeping. You were snapping at people. Sabrina said if we could just slow you down a little. I laughed, sharp and bitter. So you decided to poison me. That's how you help. Sabrina's voice came again, raspier now. You kept showing up to meetings. You were never supposed to bounce back like that. The rage hit me then. Not hot and explosive, but cold. Clear. You kept notes, didn't you? I said. On what worked, what didn't. Like I was some kind of science experiment. Dr. Harris's brow furrowed. Notes. I turned to her. If you search Ethan's office at Lang & Whitmore, you'll find them. And check his laptop. He logs everything. Dr. Harris stepped out, already calling someone. Ethan looked at me. Not with anger, not even guilt. With shame. I didn't know it would get this far, he whispered. Didn't you, I said. Detective Mendoza arrived that evening. Tall, calm, with the kind of presence that makes you sit up straighter. She listened. Didn't interrupt. Asked the right questions. I showed her the phone, the backups, the hidden recordings, the calendar of illness. She was quiet a long time. I've worked domestic abuse cases for 15 years, she finally said. This isn't just sabotage, this is attempted murder. I didn't cry, I just nodded. We'll need a full warrant, she continued. Home, offices, phones. I glanced into Sabrina's room. She was awake now, hooked to monitors, watching me like a cornered animal. Good, I said. Detectives raided Ethan's desk the next morning. They found 5 unmarked vials, clinical labels, and a notebook. Dosages, reactions, timestamps, everything meticulously logged. I looked at it for 2 seconds and had to leave the room. Who keeps track of how sick they make someone who studies it? Ethan was arrested on the spot. So was Sabrina, once she was cleared to leave the hospital. They didn't even fight it. The trial started 3 months later. I sat there every day. Front row. Not for revenge. Not to see them suffer. But to remind myself it was real. That I hadn't imagined any of it. The prosecution was relentless. They played the recordings, read the texts aloud. They held up the vials, explained their contents. Dr. Harris testified. So did the pharmaceutical rep who confirmed Ethan had stolen the compounds from a friend at a research lab. Intent, premeditation, escalation. The courtroom was silent when the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like a year, I exhaled without pain. I didn't know who I was when the trial ended. It's strange. You think once the nightmare's over, you'll feel free, light, like something has been lifted. But I didn't feel light. I felt hollow. For almost a year, I'd been fighting to survive. I'd lived in fear of a meal, a drink, a smile that hid a lie. Every day was strategy. Every interaction was surveillance. And now that it was over, now that they were behind bars, I had no idea what to do with myself. The silence was deafening. The first week I slept with the light on. I couldn't trust the dark. The second I threw out everything in my kitchen, plates, glasses, spices, the coffee maker. I scrubbed every inch of my apartment like I could erase the memories with bleach and vinegar. I didn't tell anyone at work. They knew something had happened, of course they did. The whispers had started long before the trial. But I kept it quiet. Professional, detached. I had a health scare, I said. A family dispute, just some legal stuff. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want to be the woman who was poisoned by her own husband and sister-in-law. I wanted to be competent again, respected, untouched. But trauma doesn't work like that. I'd sit in meetings nodding along and suddenly smell something sharp bitter and feel my whole body lock up. I couldn't drink coffee for 3 months. I'd carry my own water bottle everywhere sealed and marked. And still, I didn't feel safe. So I started rebuilding, slowly, deliberately, like stacking bricks after a fire. First, I found a therapist. Her name was Margot, soft-spoken but sharp. The kind of woman who didn't flinch when I said things like, "They tried to erase me," or "I still feel like I'm being watched." She nodded. "Every time." "Of course you do," she said. "You were hunted in plain sight." I hated that word hunted, but she was right. We talked about trust, control, the way trauma makes your brain rewire itself. And slowly, I learned how to breathe again. Not just in the quiet, but in the noise. The meetings, the strategy calls, the coffee shop line. I said yes to small things. Dinner with coworkers, a short flight for a conference, leading a new pitch. And I failed. The first pitch I gave after the trial, I froze halfway through, forgot my own slides. My voice cracked. I had to excuse myself and cry in the bathroom for 10 minutes before I could return. But I went back. And the next one I nailed it. Clients started trusting me again. Referrals came in. Quietly, steadily, my reputation returned. But this time, it wasn't built on charm or convenience. It was built on grit. Then came the Henderson renewal. They reached out in October, said they wanted me to lead their national relaunch. The same client Ethan and Sabrina tried to sabotage. The same account they thought would break me. I stared at the email for a long time. Not because I didn't want it, but because I wasn't sure if I was ready to want anything again. I said yes, and then I worked like hell. I built a campaign that didn't just sell a product, it sold resilience, identity, power. We launched in January. Numbers soared. Engagement doubled. It became one of the firm's most successful projects to date, and that's when something shifted inside me. I didn't feel hollow anymore. I felt anchored. I started getting invited to speak panels, podcasts, even a leadership summit. At first, I said no. I didn't want to be a story. I didn't want to be the woman who survived. But one day, Margot asked me something I couldn't shake. "What if your story isn't just about survival?" she said. "What if it's about ownership?" So I said yes to a local women's business event. My palms were sweaty, my notes were a mess. But when I walked on that stage and looked out at the audience, women in suits, women in hoodies, women with tired eyes and curious minds, I spoke. Not just about marketing, about resilience, boundaries, the cost of ignoring your gut. I didn't give details, but I said enough. Afterward, a woman waited by the side of the stage, late 30s, sharp jaw, kind eyes. She said, "Thank you. I didn't realize how much I was swallowing until I heard you speak." I smiled. And in that moment, I realized this is what power looks like, not revenge, not dominance. Clarity, calm, control. I moved out of our old apartment 6 months after the sentencing. It wasn't the same place anymore, even though Ethan hadn't lived there in months. His energy lingered in the walls, the drawers, the toothbrush I never threw away. My new space is smaller, simpler. Light pours in from the east. I painted the walls myself, chose every piece of furniture with care. My kitchen is stocked with things I actually use. My spices are labeled. My mugs don't come with hidden meanings. One morning I made coffee. Real coffee. The good kind, ground beans, glass carafe, filtered water. And I sat by the window and drank it. Alone. No trembling. No second guessing. I don't need to flinch anymore. A year after the sentencing, I stood at the podium at the Nashville Business Leaders Conference, the one Sabrina once said I wasn't seasoned enough to attend. Now I was the keynote speaker. I wore a navy suit, clean lines, no jewelry except a simple silver ring I bought myself. No one to impress, nothing to prove. My name was printed in bold letters on the brochure, top billing, and as I looked out at the sea of executives, consultants, and rising talent, I saw something in their eyes that surprised me. Respect, not curiosity, not sympathy. They didn't know what had happened to me, not most of them. They just knew the work, the results, the comeback. My name is Isabelle Grant, I began, and I'm here to talk about trust, not just in business, but in yourself. I paused, letting it settle, because that was the lesson. That was the whole damn story in one sentence. You can be gaslit, undermined, poisoned literally or otherwise, but if you don't abandon your own voice, you'll survive. Maybe not in one piece, but strong enough to rebuild. The speech ended with a standing ovation. I smiled, bowed my head slightly, and stepped off stage. Later that night, back at my apartment, I got a Google alert I hadn't realized was still active. Ethan Grant and Sabrina Lang begin sentences at Tennessee State Correctional. I didn't open the article. There was nothing left in their story that interested me. Their company was gone, their licenses revoked, their reputations shredded. There was no satisfaction in it, just closure. I turned back to my desk. A proposal for a new client was waiting a referral from the Henderson team. They said they loved how I handled pressure. I smiled. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside a folded piece of paper. A single line of neat handwriting. You were never supposed to win, but I underestimated you. No signature, but I knew who it was. Sabrina's handwriting was always perfect. I stared at it for a long time. Not angry, not scared, just done. I didn't respond. I filed it away with the court documents, not out of sentiment, but as evidence, just in case. Sometimes I still get nervous. In restaurants, I watch the waiter pour my water. At meetings, I double-check my notes, not because I don't trust myself, but because I remember what it's like when no one else does. But mostly I'm okay. I walk differently now, head higher, steps firmer. I don't apologize for taking up space. A younger colleague asked me recently, "How did you bounce back after everything?" And I told her the truth. I didn't bounce. I rebuilt. One boundary at a time, one truth at a time, one decision to live, to rise, to lead at a time. There's this quiet moment that happens when you finally stop living in reaction to someone else's destruction. It's not loud, not cinematic, just stillness. That's what I felt the night I hosted my first client dinner at home. A small group, 6 guests, wine, handmade pasta, music playing low in the background. No staged smiles, no ulterior motives, just people and trust. One of the women raised a toast halfway through. To growth, she said, and to the kind of strength you can't fake. Glasses clinked. I looked around and realized something. They didn't know the full story, but they knew the energy in the room. And that was enough. So no, I never got a dramatic confrontation in a courtroom. No screaming match. No how could you moment that ended in tears. What I got was better. I got my peace. I got my name back. I got to write the ending, not them. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like becoming untouchable. I used to think survival meant staying quiet, keeping the peace, pretending nothing was wrong. But real survival is louder. It's choosing truth over comfort, clarity over denial. They thought they could poison my body and erase my name. But I didn't disappear. I documented, I endured. And then I rose. Not for revenge, not to prove a point, but because I finally chose myself. And in the end, that was the one decision they couldn't control.